Hello and welcome back. I'm Elizabeth and this is Time Scholar and I'm very happy to have you here yet again today. So today I'm going to be talking about ancient history and more specifically I'm going to be talking about the myth of Prometheus. So Prometheus was a titan. So he was one of a group of very powerful deities that ruled before the Olympian gods that we all know now, such as, Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, Athena. The gods that are really in sort of modern day media are the ones that we know as the Olympian gods. So the Titans, of which there were 12, there were 6 male and 6 female, were the children of Uranus, the sky, and of Gaia, the earth. So they were the most powerful beings in the cosmos at this point in time, as noted by Hesiod in his Theogony as well. So they ruled until they were overthrown in what was a 10-year war between the Titans and what we now know as the Olympian gods. This war, which was known as the Titanochemy, I can't pronounce it very well, overthrew the Titans and left Zeus as the king of the gods, so kind of what we now know as the king of the gods as well. So Prometheus himself was actually a second-generation Titan, being the son of Iapetus, who was a Titan himself, and Clymene, who was an oceanoid, a nymph, so one of 3,000, which has also been translated as being one of like an innumerable amount as well of daughters to Oceanus and Tethys, who were also Titans, but due to, the age of the sources and things, and the language used, sometimes the, direct translations can be a bit skew with. So Prometheus' name actually meant forethought as well, which is incredibly fitting for him, as will be seen later on as well. So he's not only known for his intelligence, but he's also known for his concern regarding the future of humanity as well. So when the children of Kronos rose up against the Titans in this 10-year war, Prometheus and his brother actually sided with the Olympians rather than with their family of the Titans. And it said this is because Prometheus knew that the Olympians were going to win and that the Titans were going to lose, which also works into his name, forethought. But it's also said in other myths that, he was winning at the time, he was trying to save his back, basically. And yeah, the Olympians won, as we know. Zeus became king of the gods, and the Titans were all imprisoned in Tartarus, which is a very nasty area of the underworld, which was used to imprison all of the Titans. But Prometheus actually did not receive this punishment. By aligning himself with the Olympian gods, he actually saved himself from this punishment. And Tartarus was an awful, awful place to be, with Plato even quoting that it's where souls were judged after death and where the wicked received divine punishment. It was seen as sort of the antithesis of Elysium, which was seen as, the absolute upper echelon of, of the underworld. It would be where all of the absolute heroes of Greece would go. It was where they were honoured and where they would live out their lives in sort of absolute luxury for everything they had given to the gods and to Greece. And yeah, so if you think about as far away from that as you can get, that's where the Titans were. So Prometheus managing to not go there was actually quite a feat in itself. So he even rose to favour within the Olympian gods as well. He was not feared by them or disliked by them, but this actually was rather short-lived due to his future actions, which I will be talking about later. Prometheus is also, in some myths, credited with creating humanity. So it is said that he moulded humans out of clay and got the help of Athena to breathe life into them. But he only made men, which is also important to note for later on in this video. So it's a myth that is heavily favoured by Hesiod as well. And Prometheus is also known as a being who really cared for humanity. And it's said that seeing his creations, the humans down on Earth, weak, cold, and vulnerable, it really affected him. It was really awful for him. And the newly made humans were living in a world where they were at the whims of nature, the whims of the gods. They had no fire, no tools. They couldn't really build a civilization for themselves. And Prometheus really wanted to help them get out of this predicament. He really cared for them, which led him to making quite a few dangerous decisions. So the first thing that Prometheus did, which did not impress the gods whatsoever, was the trick at Mycenae. So as noted in Hesiod and his Theogony, be helpful if I could speak, which is the only surviving account as well of this myth. Prometheus played a trick against Zeus, the king of the gods, which, without much surprise, went down incredibly badly. So they were taking part in a sacrificial meal, as the gods and humans had arranged a meeting to settle the division of sacrifice. So there was a big debate as to, when you sacrifice an animal to the gods, do the gods get given the meat or do they get given the bones? And same the other way around, do the humans get to keep the meat for their sacrifice or do they get to keep the bones from their sacrifice as well? So they were meeting in order to kind of discuss this and come to a conclusion. So it was actually Prometheus's job to kill an ox in order to fulfill this meeting. But it was in this act of killing and preparing the ox that he did trick Zeus. So he divided the ox into two separate piles. One had all of the meat, but then he had hidden all of the meat with the offal and the stomach of the ox. And the other pile had all of the bones, but was hidden with the fat and the skin of the ox. So the second pile looked far more appetizing. It looked like the one to go for. So when Prometheus offered to Zeus, because he was the king of the gods, of course he was going to go first, he went, pick a pile. Zeus picked the second one. And this meant that in every future sacrifice, the humans would get to keep the meat, and the gods would be given the bones. And this can be actually seen in a lot of ancient plays and literature as well. If you look through a lot of it, you can actually see mentions of sacrifices, and when it does involve animals and not just wine, you will see them offering the bones to the gods. So that's where this came from. And Zeus took these bones back to Olympus. He was feeling pretty proud of himself, but he was really embarrassed by his mistake when he placed it down in front of the Olympians and realized that all he had picked up was bones. So there is a debate as to whether this choice by Zeus was purposeful or not. Hesiod writes that it was, that, by choosing the bones, it gave him a reason to sort of unleash his wrath on humans. He had a lot of inbuilt anger for them, so it gave him an excuse as to sort of use that anger towards them. But in other versions of the myth, it is said that Zeus had no idea, which in itself would have given him reason to be angry anyway, because he would have felt tricked and outsmarted. And he knew at this point that Prometheus had helped the humans out. So already Prometheus was in a tight spot with the king of the gods, having been one of the only titans to not get imprisoned in Tartarus, and now to, go on and trick him in such a way, he was walking on quite thin ice as well. And this entire situation is actually what led Zeus to taking fire from the humans. It is up for debate as to whether humans already had fire or whether Zeus was withholding fire from them, but it's this trick that led him to that act as well. So Zeus knew that Prometheus really cared for humanity and the humans that he created, and in retribution for his trick at Mycenae, Zeus took fire away. It was that simple. Zeus just withheld fire from humanity, which meant that they couldn't, create civilizations, they couldn't forge weapons, they couldn't keep themselves warm. It really put humanity in the pocket of the gods. It is actually said in Hesiod's work in Days, that humans already knew of fire, but Zeus took it away, and in other myths it's said that humans didn't even know about fire at this point, and Zeus was holding it from them. But long story short, no matter which myth you read, Zeus was making sure that humans could not progress. He was making sure that he had them in the pocket of the gods. They had to ask the gods for everything. They're at the whim of the gods and of nature and of absolutely everything around them. They couldn't really build on anything for themselves. So by withholding fire, Zeus really plunged humans into darkness. He almost put a stop to civilization. They couldn't even do simple things like keep themselves warm at night. So after Zeus had taken fire away, Prometheus was not best pleased, and he actually snuck onto Olympus, or was taken by Helios' sun chariot, depending on which version of the myth that you do read, and he stole fire from the gods, which, as I think we can all consider, was probably not his rightest decision ever, considering he was already not doing too well with Zeus at this point in time. But he did this by working his way into the workshop of Hephaestus, who was the god of blacksmithing and fire. And Prometheus, in his workshop, saw arrows that had been forged for Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, seen Zeus's thunderbolts, which were ready to smite the humans as well, and it really just put more of a fire under him that he thought he needed to do this. He needed to put humans on a level playing field. What Zeus was doing to them was not something he agreed with. He thought that they deserved to be able to build themselves up, not just be in constant debt to the gods. So it is from here that Prometheus snuck over to Hephaestus's hearth and took a single spark of fire, which he stored in using a stalk of fennel, and he took it all the way back down to Earth from the Mount of Olympus, where Hephaestus's workshop, sorry, that's the word, was based, and he gave them fire, and he taught them not just that, but how to be strong. Prometheus had a lot of care for his creations, and it is also said that he taught them maths and architecture so that, they could build buildings and create a proper civilization. He taught them astronomy and navigation so that they could continue to, move across the world, and they could, build something for themselves, how to forge metal, and more. By giving fire to humanity, Prometheus allowed for civilizations to be built, he allowed for wars to be fought, he allowed for them to catch animals and eat them, he allowed for, just civilization to take a real step forward, something that Zeus was trying to keep away from them. And this, unsurprisingly, really angered Zeus. Prometheus had gone completely against his direction as king, and he had stolen from the gods, which is something that was just of an absolute unmeasurable weight of wrong as well to him. So Prometheus, after already have been walking on thin ice with what happened with the ox, had now really just got himself between a rock and a hard place with what he has done to Zeus by giving humans fire. So after Prometheus had stolen from the gods, Zeus was, not at all happy. He was actually a very, very angry man, because he didn't only steal from the gods, but he made sure that humans didn't need to rely on the gods as much anymore, Although many humans would still worship the Olympian gods, as they had done, Prometheus' act of stealing fire meant that there was always going to be some that questioned their power. There were always going to be outliers, people who didn't think they needed to sacrifice things to the gods, people who didn't think they needed to worship the gods, because why would they need to? They can do everything themselves. They have fire, they can create weapons, they can have food, they can make houses, off of everything that Prometheus has taught them. So it had a knock-on effect. It wasn't just giving humans fire, it was also taking away Zeus's power, which I think was more of the reason why, personally, that he was so angry about the entire thing. There was no more blind devotion to the gods' actions. Humans had sort of developed a way of thinking, sort of some rationale, which they didn't have previously. So Prometheus' punishment is one that Zeus definitely thought fit the crime in his eyes, but it is one that is also known as being incredibly gruesome. It is not at all something that you could even think would be worth the crime in my eyes. So Zeus captured Prometheus, having him bound to the side of a cliff in unbreakable bonds forged by Hephaestus, the king of blacksmithing, so he was not going anywhere. Then Zeus called upon a vulture who came to Prometheus every single day, and this vulture would eat Prometheus' liver every single day before going away at night. And as Prometheus was immortal, every evening that liver would heal, and the vulture would come back again and do it the next day. It is also said that even throughout all of his torture, Prometheus never regretted stealing from Zeus, giving fire to the humans, and rebelling against the gods. It is said that he stood firm in his actions and in, what he thought was right, which I think is part of the reason why this myth still endures today as well. But there was more than just Prometheus' own punishment. Zeus did more than that. Zeus punished what Prometheus loved, which was humanity, his creations of clay. Zeus created Pandora, which I think a lot of us know from Pandora's Box. I know I learned that as a kid in school. I think I had a book about this big telling me the story of Pandora's Box. And she was the first woman as well. So Prometheus had only created men, and Zeus created the first woman, and sent her down to Earth with a jar or a box, depending on the translation that you read. And inside this vessel was every single form of suffering that you could ever imagine, from war to disease to jealousy to desire to, anything bad that you can think of. Pandora had it in this box, and this box eventually did get opened. The story of Pandora is finished with all of that coming out of the box, and the last thing coming out is hope, which is very interesting considering it was punishment that Zeus was trying to give. The stealing of fire didn't just get Prometheus punished, but got what he really cared about punished as well. It also indirectly almost set in motion the entire moral complexity of humanity, which is a very big sort of thing to claim. But it did, without Prometheus having stolen fire and teaching humanity, how to forge, how to build buildings, how to voyage, how to sort of care for themselves, Zeus would never have felt the need to create Pandora and release her into the world, and release all of those things that make humanity complex and sort of give people a sense of morality. The things that kind of make humanity difficult. You know, before Pandora, people were just living in harmony. There was no war, no disease, you know, no desire. There was nothing really to be concerned about. So Prometheus's actions really didn't just irritate Zeus, didn't just bring fire back to the humans, sorry, but he also did a lot in bringing forth what I think we would know humanity to be today, something that is difficult and intricate and not sort of 2D and easy to understand. And he did all of this himself, going all the way back to taking the side of the Olympians during that 10-year battle against the Titans. All of this he was kind of setting up, almost, indirectly or directly, who knows, for humanity to become what humanity is today. So overall, I actually think the myth of Prometheus is incredibly interesting. It's actually one of my favourite ancient Greek myths, and I think it just has such an enduring quality, as well, as I've mentioned throughout this video. Prometheus was almost a catalyst for everything that happened, you know, especially with the stealing of the fire indirectly being the reason for the instatement of Pandora on Earth, you know, Prometheus being a titan, managing to escape the fate of the other titans as well. He didn't outsmart Zeus once, but twice. You know, it's just insane. It's one of the most enduring stories from Greek mythology. I do feel that, like, a lot of people know the myth of Prometheus, maybe not in its entirety, but they know about the stealing of fire and the returning of it to the gods as well. But it's not just that. I feel like the myth of Prometheus really teaches us a real sort of moral lesson, which again links into sort of the bringing in of the entire moral complexity of being a human, you know, which is, you know, the power and the price of knowledge. You know, he had to pay for the knowledge that he gave humanity, and humanity also had to pay for having that knowledge with Pandora. You know, it's a symbol of resistance. Like, it said that he just, you know, obviously no one would enjoy getting their liver picked out by a vulture every day, but he said that he never regretted rebelling against the gods, because that's what he decided was right. So that sort of story of resistance as well, and sacrifice for a greater good. Prometheus, in turn, really sacrificed himself for his creation, for humanity. If he hadn't sacrificed himself, the humans would have been in the pocket of the gods, they would not have been able to look after themselves, they would have been in darkness until Zeus decided it was right for them not to be. And Zeus was somebody with quite a big ego, so who knows when that might have been as well. So by sort of giving himself up, Prometheus gave humanity so much more. You know, I feel like the myth of Prometheus teaches so much, and it's a myth that still holds a lot of weight today. And it's just, you know, something that I love about ancient Greek mythology is the stories that it can tell, but also the moral lessons that it can teach us. And I feel like the myth of Prometheus is a massive one for that as well, especially its interlink with the story of Pandora, and the interlink as well with the story of, you know, Zeus choosing the bones over the meat, which even in itself meant that, you know, humans, every sacrifice, got to eat, which in turn is also written about later in other literature, where, you know, they would have feasts, and this would be sometimes that, you know, slaves in Athens, for instance, they would get to eat the meat as well, because they were people taking part in this sacrifice. So in turn, Prometheus allowed people who may not have been able to live a life like that to eat meat at these festivals, you know, to have a day off as a slave. It's just an insane myth, I think, that is one that is really important as well, as much as it is interesting. I feel like we can learn a lot from it, and if we actually took in the lessons from Prometheus's myth, you know what, I feel like maybe we could all learn something from it. And yeah, so sorry for my rambling at the end there, but that was the myth of Prometheus, as I think it came across. It's what I'm very passionate about. It is one of my favourite ancient Greek myths as well. But I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, don't forget to like and subscribe, and also comment below anything that you'd like to hear. So next week will be a modern history video, so if anyone has any suggestions for that, or for an ancient history video the week after, let me know, and I will do my research and do my best to put a video together for you guys. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.